We're going to get started. Thank you. It's wonderful to see you here, all of you. I'm Sharon Atchison. I'm the chair of the Lifelong Learning Committee here at Beth Synagogue. It's nice to see so many members, friends, community members, and newcomers to our event this evening. There's some nosh over there. Feel free to have it at any time. And we are going to have an amazing event, but I just want to let people know that afterwards, Yiscah Smith will be signing books that you can purchase at the back table. If you want to go up there now and grab one to follow along, that's fine too. The format of tonight is going to be a teaching from Yiscah Smith, and that will be followed by a conversation between Yiscah and Yiscah Smith. And then we'll have questions from you all. I'm going to do the introduction now. Yiscah Smith is a thought leader, spiritual activist, and agent of change who addresses the spiritual practice of encountering the divine spark within and beyond. Yiscah teaches at the Parnas Institute of Jewish Studies, Applied Jewish Spirituality, and the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. Is that the same thing?
No, it's two different.
It's different.
Okay.
It's awesome. It's just an amazing alphabet soup and content. She founded the Conscious Community Nachlot, an alternative prayer space in Jerusalem that hosts Shabbat spiritual gatherings. And she relies on spiritual teachings and contemplative practices to inspire her students and audiences, acting as a compass, gently guiding them to their unique inner selves, their souls. And as a spiritual trailblazer, Yiscah encourages, empowers, and ennobles others to remain faithful to their individual and unique spiritual paths. Hence, her post-diaspora spiritually infused Torah teachings are radically compassionate and connecting. Yiscah will share a portion of her book on the table.
And everyone has a copy of the PDF.
And there's a PDF copy for those who don't have the book. Anchored in this week's Torah portion, Aharei Mot, Kedoshim, she'll discuss the dilemma that the high priest encounters when performing the special Yom Kippur service. The resolution occurs when an individual becomes part of something bigger than his own limited self. This becomes a spiritual practice of connection that nurtures God consciousness in ourselves and the world around us, quite timely as we live in a world fraught with disconnection, fear, and anxiety. This book is called Planting Seeds of the Divine, Torah Commentaries to Cultivate Your Spiritual Practice. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Yiscah Smith to Beth.
Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. Thank you to the rabbi and all of you for helping me share the Torah that's coming through me into the world. There's a lot of loneliness in the world right now. In Israel, outside of Israel, the Jewish world, the non-Jewish world. There's a lot of a sense of confusion, anxiety. I don't have to go through the laundry list. You all know what they are. But I'm here to provide a remedy. A remedy, not the remedy, but like an idea of a remedy, how we could feel more connected to each other. And it's based on a verse which seems so irrelevant to our everyday lives now, and part of what I do in my scholarship and how I've written this book, which we'll get into more of the format later, is to take something that seems so irrelevant, so old, so many millennia ago, and help the reader or the student and myself realize it's as relevant right now as if I'm at Sinai receiving it. And I hope that by the time we conclude this teaching, you'll feel, wow, there's that in this verse? And it's just one among many verses that I provide during the course of the year with the weekly Torah portion. It really becomes a resource, like an inner, something we have inside of us we can lean on. It's like a spiritual toolbox. So you know, when a carpenter has a toolbox, there could be 1 screwdriver or 10 screwdrivers. Obviously, if there's 10 screwdrivers, it enables the carpenter to do more work. I provide a spiritual toolbox with 47 different tools. I use that metaphor. We'll talk about the seed, planting the seeds of the divine later when I'm in conversation with the rabbi. So I want to get right into it now. And I want to say also, this is a privilege, a real blessing for me, because in the, let's see, 4, 8, 10, in about the 12 different Shabbatot, 12 weeks I've been back and forth to Israel sharing this in the States. This is the first time I'm actually sharing a piece from the book and then moving into an in conversation with. So it'll be interesting to see how this works, right? Okay, so if you have the book, it's on page 155. If you don't have the book, you have the handout, which is taken from the book. Okay. So what I've done is I put on the top of the page the name of the Torah portion, and then with the focal point, what I will call the seed, planting the seed of like a divine awareness, that we have this garden, which we'll talk about more later in conversation with, but we have this internal potential to really have a sense of our spirituality, to have a sense of what it means to be godly, where it's an immanent and visceral experience rather than a theology of an idea of something out there. And I identify and I take out, I extract from each Torah portion a seed or a tool or a midah, a spiritual disposition that helps us become more sensitive. So what I've extracted from this portion is letting go of the me to be with the we. And there's a lot of, today, there's a lot of loneliness, a lot of people, including yours truly in my past, were really afraid because we didn't know how to be with the we because of the me. And you'll see what I mean as we move through this. So I present to the reader 1 or 2 verses that from that I will hopefully convey to you successfully how what's in this verse helps us realize how much we really need to cultivate this practice of letting go of the me to be with the we. And it's based on 1 pasuk in Leviticus, in this week's Torah portion, when he goes, meaning the Kohen Gadol, when he goes in to make expiation in the shrine, meaning the avodah on Yom Kippur, nobody else shall be in the tent of meeting until he comes out. So here's the Kohen, there's the Ohel Moed, there's the Holy of Holies. So we're learning here that no one can go here while the Kohen Gadol is in there. As I move through this, by the way, if there's any questions, not on the idea that we can say for later, but on the actual text, please raise your hand. Okay? So I presented in each chapter, each portion, I bring the reader up to date plot-wise from last week's parsha to this week's parsha. By the way, that was JPS's suggestion that I do that. So I give them the credit, because not everyone follows the parsha the way I do, you know. So then the next section is called At First Glance. And this is what we call in Hebrew the Peshat. So I rely on a lot of medieval commentators, also the Gemara, the Talmud, the Mishnah, some from even going back to the 10th century, where I analyze or I present to the reader different ideas that address the external apparent meaning, which can either lend itself to the more of an issue or clarify. I pretty much go for it adds to the issue, because that's when I bring in the deeper dive, because I want to leave you unsatisfied. Because if I don't leave you unsatisfied, you'll close the book and say, wow, what a wonderful teaching. But the real teaching has to do with the internal, not the external. But we need to first explore the external. So here's what we do here. At first glance, our verse prohibits any person from entering the tent of meeting. This is the inner courtyard. When the high priest enters the sacred shrine, or we call the Holy of Holies, the innermost sanctum of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And later on it became the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. This annual encounter between the eternal and the high priest on Yom Kippur is to remain intimate and private. One person in one place at only one time with the one. So that's what was happening. That's what this was leading towards, this very special, intimate moment. Now the Chizkuni, who is a commentator from France, lived in the 13th century, and you'll see with every commentator, I provide in parentheses the full name of the person, the century, and where the person lived. He explains, or he attempts to explain, what this injunction is about. When it says in the verse, nobody else shall be in the tent of meeting, as meaning the following: not just any human being, as non-priests are never allowed into those areas. Like, why would the verse say nobody? Already we know that most people can never go because most people are not the priests. So, but this is a warning to other priests not to be in this designated space during the period that the high priest performs these functions. So that's part of what how he understands the word anybody. While this may be obvious to some, since non-priests are always forbidden from entering the inner courtyard, Chizkuni's interpretation posits that the real concern behind that prohibition is to ensure that the other priests, who would customarily go into the inner courtyard, do not enter at this time. That's a logical understanding. But why would the verse, why state this in such an ostensibly convoluted way? Why not just say, no other priest shall be in the tent of meeting? Does everyone understand that question? No. Yes?
Except when I read this section, it always sounds to me like the only time anybody should enter the Holy of Holies is the high priest on this day, but nobody else.
No,
Am I missing something?
What, to a degree, but not really, because you're focusing on where the Kohen Gadol goes to. But from here, before he gets there, he has to go through the tent of meeting. That's this inner courtyard, which usually priests go all the time.
Okay.
So the question is, why doesn't the verse just say that on Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol approaches the Holy of Holies, which everyone knows, only the Kohen Gadol, and only on Yom Kippur, even he doesn't go any other day of the year.
Okay.
So why doesn't the verse just say, for priests who usually go into the inner courtyard, on Yom Kippur you're not allowed? Obviously, when it says like anybody, well, who's going to think, like me or you, who's going, if we're not a Kohen, why would we think, oh, on Yom Kippur I can't the other 364 days of the year. So that's the power of why Chizkuni, yes, he clears one thing up, but it leads to another question, which is very rabbinical. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a whole Talmud.
So this rule only applies on Yom Kippur?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
just
yes. That's what this whole section is about.
Okay.
Now, to make matters more interesting, I bring in another commentary, the Bechor Shor. Now, he also was from France in the 12th century. He alternatively holds that the verse prohibits exactly what it states. The textual wording of nobody else means all people, in order to emphasize the exceptional solemnness of this time and place, because it's only on Yom Kippur. Now, this is the Torah's way of accentuating the intense holiness of the moment. The high priest's unique service and responsibilities require such an exceptional spiritual sensitivity that only the high priest is qualified to be present in this sacred space at this solemn moment. And because he needs to go through the inner courtyard, he's already beginning to prepare himself spiritually. I mean, could you imagine the entire nation of Israel is hoping you're going to do this right? And that's why, in fact, the Talmud says this. We don't learn this from a pasuk, by the way. This is like in the oral tradition, which wasn't compiled till the 3rd century, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century CE. People would tie a rope around the Kohen Gadol. And don't ask me if I really believe it's true, because my response is, of course it is, and of course it isn't. Because we really don't know. But we imagine that he needed to be so focused to really attain this level of really being so intimately connected with God that if he thought of his ego for 1 minute, like, I hope this is going to work so they'll all love me, he would die immediately. But because no one can go in to retrieve him, they have to pull, and it never happened. I love the way they could, and it never happened. Like, how do you know it never happened? Right? We're talking like more than 1,000 years earlier, but okay, it never happened. It just gives credence to this idea of cultivating mindfulness, which we think is a modern concept, but we have it in Judaism from the beginning. Okay. However, this is now me talking. Okay, I presented on purpose 2 different commentaries, hopefully leading you to feel unsatisfied. Yes, it makes sense, but what does that have to do with me today? All right, nobody, everybody, non-priest, yes priest, who cares? I'll be really honest with you. I remember when I first learned this many, many years ago, like, really? I'm supposed to be interested in this? I mean, I can appreciate the history of the ritual, but every year I have to relearn it? All right, so logically, the B'kor Shor's answer to one question now raises even more questions. If this verse prohibits all people, now get ready, this is what I'm going to suggest here, because I'm relying on another commentary that we haven't even gotten to yet. If this verse prohibits all people from entering the tent of meeting, wouldn't this exclude the high priest? I mean, is he a person or not a person? So if the verse Dafka says, if it especially says all people, to include even priests, who might think that they can go through, because they always go through this area, well, why would the Kohen Gadol think it excludes him? Isn't he part of all people? God set us up for a trap here. We know he didn't fly, he didn't sprout like wings and fly over the tent of meeting. He walked through the tent of meeting. Well, either you're part of humanity or you're not part of humanity. If you are, you can't. However, he has to first pass through the tent of meeting which all people are prohibited from doing. How can it be possible that the high priest is not included in all people? That's really my question. And the way I answer it, you'll see, it's as relevant now as it was then. I hope you'll agree, or at least, I'm not asking you to agree. I'm asking you to be open-hearted, to perhaps see a resonance with how we live today. So how could he be included? He's not included, but he is included, but how could he be included? All these questions would not arise had the verse explicitly stated that only the high priest can enter both the tent of meeting and the sacred shrine. I mean, if I were the author of the Torah, especially with the editor that I worked with at JPS, who really drove me, I mean, she was fantastic. You know, she was amazing, Joy Weinstein. I fell in love with her. She just like this. Well, she would say to me, Yiscah, you can save a lot of words. Just say, the holy priest is the only priest that can go to the tent of meeting. End of story. And everyone else is prohibited. Wouldn't that be so much easier? But then there wouldn't be a B'kor Shor, there wouldn't be a Chizkuni, there wouldn't be me, there wouldn't be you learning about this. That's the power of the oral tradition. It's a setup. Because we were created to use our minds and to open our hearts. So there always has to be something in every Torah portion that, I don't know, I really respect, I really show honor, and it's not all coming together. And that's okay. That's more than okay. Might the ambiguities be inviting us to seek another way of understanding? And of course, I say yes, and that's why we need the deeper dive. So the deeper dive, and I write this in the introduction because I use the same template for each portion. The deeper dive is exactly that. I rely on the Zohar, on Kabbalah, a little bit of Kabbalah, mainly Hasidism and Neo-Hasidism, right through the renewal through Reb Zalman and Art Green, Heschel for sure. I quote some of their ideas and also my own ideas in this deeper dive. So we're going to move into the deeper dive, and I invite you to, we'll share 3 breathing cycles together, and in that, I invite you to try to move from seeing the world through the lens of physicality to the lens of spirituality, which means it doesn't have to make sense physically because it isn't. So it's really expanding your mind, or what's called in the Kabbalah, we're moving from mochin to kanut to mochin to gadlut, from a limited consciousness in the physical, because physicality is limited, to a higher consciousness of, to quote Emily Dickinson, I dwell in the realm of possibility. So let us move gently into that as we share together, being breathed into, being given life for 3 complete cycles of receiving and then returning with gratitude. Breath awareness, there's nothing like it to transition us into the realm of possibility. Returning to our quandary. Thank you, by the way, thank you. How does the Torah expect the high priest to engage in the expected Yom Kippur rituals in the holy shrine, the Holy of Holies, when, as a person, he appears to be prohibited to pass through the tent of meeting, which he must pass through en route to the holy shrine? The Hasidic masters attempt to resolve this quandary, though quite a radical and creative approach. Somehow, as strange as many of us may find this interpretation, the one that I'm going to suggest now, the high priest spiritually now, not physically, but spiritually sheds his shared state of being a person before entering the tent of meeting. This enables him to pass through the area prohibited to all people, including the high priest, if he didn't do this, ensuring him safe passage into the sacred shrine without transgression. How may we understand this unorthodox idea? The Meah Shiloach, I don't know who here, maybe some of you have heard of him. His real name is Mordechai Yosef Leiner of Ishbitz. He's called the Meah Shiloach, as many Hasidic masters, named after his main book that he wrote, called Meah Shiloach. And he lived in Poland in the 19th century, so many centuries after the 2 medieval commentators who lived in France. And this is what he describes. During the Yom Kippur service, with its influx of sacred energies, and this is it says in the introduction that these are my translations, unless noted otherwise. So this is how I hope I do Meshiloach justice to you. I really do. During the Yom Kippur service, with its influx of sacred energies that flow into the world from the blessed's realm above, there was no place for a person's limited consciousness of sense of self. Because really what the Kohen Gadol is asking for is something that's beyond. So I can't speak from a place of limitation and expect to receive something that's beyond limitation. So somehow I need to in terms of my consciousness, I need to no longer be a person, even though I still have a body. Notice that the verse doesn't say no body shall go. It's no body shall go, meaning no human being. So he goes through this as a transformative process that he goes through. When entering, so the Meshiloach adds, when entering, oh wait, I skipped the line, I'm sorry. There is no place for a person's limited consciousness of the sense of self. When entering the shrine, the sacred shrine on Yom Kippur, the high priest must nullify any independent sense of self before the divine. See, and even though this is a radical idea, the Chazal, the sages, also rely on it in the 3rd century by saying that if he thinks for 1 minute of himself, he'll die. So it's not only in the deeper mystical lens, it's also in the more Talmudic lens, which I really believe is also mystical. We tend to not really appreciate that the people who wrote, the sages who wrote the Talmud, they also were mystics. Just many of the Masechtot are so legally oriented that how can that person be a mystic? Well, but how could they not be a mystic and see what's really going on to come up with these different popolim, splitting hairs, only because they see what's really going on spiritually. In this case, though, it's obvious It's obvious because the Meshiloach was so learned in Talmud. This is his understanding of what they wrote in the Gemara. So therefore, he really, really believes that somehow the Kohen Gadol had to remove or diminish or even nullify mevatel in Hebrew his sense of an independent, separate human being. And off to the side for a minute, I didn't write this here, but this is what's great when I teach from the book. I can add, because I had a budget of words. And the GPS, they didn't charge me. I mean, they accepted my proposal, but because I'm a first-time author for them, I had to go by their rules. When I have a 10th book from GPS, I'll tell them what my budget is. But then I had to go by what they told me the budget is. And so I couldn't put everything in that I wanted to share. And now I totally forgot what I was going to say. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay. All right. So this is great. This is great. So before the high priest can even begin to approach the tent of meeting, I know what I was going to say about the separate self. In the introduction to Sylvia Bornstein's book, that's funny you don't look Buddhist. Right, so in the foreword, and I forget who wrote the foreword, but there's a line there that I have highlighted, and I share a lot with my students when I'm teaching spiritual practice, where this person writes, he writes that all spiritual practices, West, East, Western, Eastern, Jewish, beyond, all of it there's one common goal, to remove the illusion, it's an illusion, that we actually are a separate self. So the fact that the Meshiloach can actually write to this, I mean, he was one of the masters of what we would call today spiritual practice. So we learn that we can do this from the Kohen Gadol, because he had to do that. He had to remove any sense of a separate self, using modern day English. We call that in Hebrew, bitul yeshut, really nullifying one sense of I-ness, of my existence. The shedding of ego as a spiritual practice becomes the focal point of the high priest's preparation for the solemn moment of entering the sacred shrine. What an amazing response. I would consider it amazing, which Jewish tradition believes to be the closest a human being can come to experiencing the divine and still remaining alive in the physical body. Only by letting go of the me can the high priest then lean into the deepest experience of union between a human being and the divine, a transcendental state of one with the one. And in English you can use the uppercase and lowercase. Can't do that in Hebrew. But I take advantage of that, like the one, lowercase, with the one, uppercase. And that becomes the we. So I'm letting go of this, like you're over there, I'm over here, I'm a separate self. So what do I have to do to be part of you? I have to not totally negate, but I have to really diminish the sense of I-ness, to be part of something bigger than me. And even like when people ask me, how do you do it in Israel? Like with everything since October 7th, since 1948, I wasn't even born yet. But since May 1948, someone wrote recently, Israel has not had one day of peace. So how do we do it? By becoming part of the we. There's so much support to each other. There's so much care for each other. I was giving an example earlier to Steve and Marcia. It's like a wonder. It's a living miracle in front of us. That's how we do it. We do it because we are part of something bigger than me. We are really part of a we. We've always been part of a we, but you really see it today, though, in a very obvious way. To most of us. I won't say to everyone. Now, this shedding, let me see what time it is. I have a little more time, right? Yeah. Look, as we say, Shabbat doesn't come into tomorrow. What are you doing the rest of the evening? There's no cholent on Thursday night to keep people learning. This shedding of the me to be the we, it remains mysterious in part because the Meshiloach never really explains what the high priest does. How did he prepare himself? Look, you can only expect so much of one human being. He already changed the whole meaning. It's like if he were alive, he'd say, you want me to give you all the answers? I'm giving you a way out of trying to figure that this is like ridiculous. Now you can say this is wonderful. You're going to have to go and learn how you actually, see, this is part of Chassidut. It invites us to be part of this relationship. So the way may be you, or the way may be you, would diminish your sense of self to be part of the we, may be different than what I need to do. That's the uniqueness, that's the beauty of the Chassidut. Of all the writings, it allows us to be creative. It's like an art form. I've come to see the Chassidut is like an art, and Jewish law, halacha, is like a science. You know, there's, you know, when you're baking a cake, there's no room for like being creative. There's 2 cups, it's not a cup and a half. It's 2 cups. But with Chassidut, it invites the person to really be part of the practice. So yet, even though he didn't give us the recipe, he gives us the idea. He gives us the idea. And yet we still may glean from this spiritual practice of shedding ego a way for us too to experience deep union with the divine. Now, I could have ended the excerpt there, the portion there. But no, I wanted to give you more. I wanted me to give you more because I wanted more. Like we went from the Peshat with an obvious issue. Then we go to Meshiloach, who kind of solves that in a way, but we're still left like, all right, but tell me, how do I do this? How do I do this? So thank God there's the P.S.S. and the Rebbe. And for those who know me, know that there's no way I can get through any day without the P.S.S. and the Rebbe. Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, who was murdered in Torinki death camp, but he lived in Warsaw. He was born in 1889. He was murdered in 1943. And he wrote 7 amazing books. His last book he wrote actually during the Holocaust, so a year before he died. So he addresses in his book called Salva Ziruz, and you can see this is all footnoted with a bibliography at the end of the book. I remember before I started writing this book, I'm not using footnotes, I want endnotes. I want footnotes, not endnotes. And JPS said, well, you want us to publish your book at the University of Nebraska? They were nice about it, because we don't do footnotes, we do endnotes. So, okay, you have to go with it. So you have to always have a marker in the back of the book so you can check the footnote. So anyway, this is what the PSS is already 20th century, so like that's another century and a half after the Meshiloach, and he's not one of the original like the older Hasidic masters. He already was post-Enlightenment. He also, many people believe, along with Hillel Zeitlin and Heschel, he really brought in the Hasidism, his ideas. So this is what he writes in this book, Salva Ziruz, which is remarkable. It's his own spiritual journal with his own challenges. Like he's describing himself without saying I. It's like, so this is what he writes. It's taught from the Baal Shem Tov, who lived in the 18th century Ukraine, concerning the verse in Deuteronomy 5:5 in Devarim, where it says, Moses is speaking to the Chevra in Deuteronomy and saying, and I stand between God and you. So before that, he says that you received this panim lefanim, like you received it face to face. So now Moses is saying, and I stood between you and God. So make up your mind, God. Like, was Moses interrupting this divine channel of communication or not? So the Baal Shem Tov, he takes the word I, it's not referring to Moshe. Listen to this, this is beautiful. This is real Chassidut, it comes right from the Baal Shem Tov. That this sense of I-ness that a person feels within themselves, whereby a person is concerned with and pursues only their own needs, this is what stands between a person and God. This is what obstructs and precludes a direct encounter between God and you. So really what Moses is saying to the Chevra, he's saying there's only one, you could have this face-to-face, this intimate encounter, but your sense of I is going to be an obstacle. That's the only, your ego will be this, like he calls it, lechitza, like a divider between God and yourself. So a person is able, and now he really helps us, like, okay, how do I want to be this. I really want to, at times we have to cultivate the I. But I want to be part of, instead of me, we. How do I do it? A person is able to minimize the sense of I-ness through loving one's fellow. Wait, we ever heard that before? Oh yeah, in Sefer Vayikra, v'ahavta l'chayacha kamocha. You shall love your fellow as yourself. And not by being a separate self. We ever heard that before? In Jewish meditation and other forms of meditation. Remaining aloof. When I stand by myself, then the barrier exists between God and you. Rather, he writes, the essence of the person and their soul, which transcends separateness, because the soul is the piece of me that's connected to everything in this room, not only with all of you, but with this microphone, with this lectern, with the floor, with the inanimate, with also all the fruit-bearing trees and all the animals, the birds, the fish. What makes me, in my essence me, is what makes everything what they are in their essence. It's the same. It's one. So I'm not only am I not a separate self, I'm completely connected with everything, which is the godly presence in everything. And it just makes so much sense. And yet, it's a challenge for us, because we have this other part, this part of this drive to survival, and the ego, and it's not enough, and what if, and I can't, and I shouldn't, and I wouldn't, and all that's about I. And that becomes this barrier, this mechitza, this barrier. However, if I'm cultivating loving one's fellow as me, then the separateness can be healed. And they will no longer be an entity by themselves. Then my desires, concerns, and joys are shared with others. You really see this in our culture. We love to eat at two very opposite energy occasions. In a shiva home and at a wedding. I mean, think about it. We support the same people. Let's say someone gives birth, so the whole community, all over the world in Jewish communities, now online you can do, the meal train or whatever it's called, and we're there to bring food and to visit, and then that same person who gave birth, one of her parents could pass away 6 months later. The same people are coming, bringing food, sitting and talking and consoling and comforting them more. So your simcha becomes my simcha, and what you're grieving over, your sadness becomes mine. That's the me becoming part of the we, and you really see that in Israel today. You really do. I mean, we celebrate miracles together, and people go to each other's shiva homes together. It's really incredible. This is what the PSSN is writing in Warsaw. Right before the war started. This is one of his later books. They also desire that all will be good for their friends as for themselves, and if their friend needs a favor, they will promptly do it. All this brings a person to feel that their life has purpose that transcends their own self. Rather, they become aware of being part of the other. This enables one to uproot the I-ness from their heart, and together we will be able to become close to one Creator. Now, I want to add, so that's from the PSS, and again, we could conclude there. And it's remarkable, and it's so relevant, and I believe it's so inspiring, and so healing for a lot of our societal ills, even beyond the Jewish world. I mean, this is good remedy, good medicine for so many people that are suffering from loneliness. But I want to make sure the reader understands, because my readers, as me, live in the 21st century. And we don't live in Poland in the 20th, and we're not living in France or Meshiloach in Ukraine, and we're not living when Chizkuni and the Bachor lived. We're living now. So I want to leave the reader with a little more encouragement that this really can be a relevance, can really have a resonance, rather, with us, which is what I mentioned earlier in the beginning. What does that have to do with me? It has everything to do with me, I believe. So this is what I add towards the conclusion. Many of us, and this is a mistake we make, and it's a natural, it's not even a judgment where what's wrong with you. It's like you're living in a world where you do think of your ego. How do you not? How do we not think of our ego? We're a human being. And it was given to us by God. So if we're not supposed to have an ego, we wouldn't have an ego, but we are supposed to have an ego. Many of us equate, though, the practice of diminishing our ego with thinking less of ourselves. Oh, who am I anyway? I'm not as smart as this person, I'm not as spiritually sensitive as that person, so I think I'm diminishing my ego. I'm inflating my ego because it's all about me. It really is, only it's inverted. Instead of me feeling better than everybody, I feel less than everybody. Well, hello, I mean, God, the same God that created the everybody created me. I'm the one, though, who's remaining aloof. I'm the one who's living in this delusion as a separate self. So what I tell the reader is, we might reconsider it to mean thinking about ourselves less. It's not that I think less of me, I think of me less. Like I don't spend so much time thinking of me. I think that's a good idea. Because it means I have a healthy ego. I have to go out into the world and earn an income, pursue a career, be responsible to my family, my students, my community members. I need to take care of myself physically. I have a certain diet, exercise. I live in a physical world. However, how much time do I have to spend thinking about me all the time? And that's what it means to hit batalut anuchiyot. It's really diminishing the sense of I, it's all about me. No, it's all about we, which includes our divine creator. If we are less I-focused, we may be more focused on other people's needs. Actually, one of my teachers said many years ago, may he rest in peace, he has since, may his memory be for blessing, Reb Shalom Barat. He said, why did God create us to even eat? Like, why do I feel when I'm hungry, I'm hungry? I don't know, my cat doesn't tell me I'm hungry. The food is there when the cat has the urge to eat. The cat doesn't feel, I don't know what the cat really feels. It doesn't feel, but I know what it's like when I feel hungry. And I don't think my cat feels that. Or I'm thirsty. Or I'm tired. Or I need to eliminate waste. I have to go to the routine. Why do I have all these I need? So Reb Shalom said, it's so you can be compassionate when other people say what they need. Because only when you know what it's like can you really be empathetic with them. So the only reason we have all these needs is to be part of God's world, not to be self-centered. Right? So the delightful irony is that the less each of us concentrates on ourselves, the more likely we may feel part of something much bigger than us in the larger world. This expanded world encompassing all kinds of people and all other creations may then enhance our own personal encounter with the divine. Because then the divine is not limited to a Beit HaKnesset or a Beit Midrash or Yom Kippur or the Seder for the night of Pesach. It's like I could be playing with the magnetiles with my grandchildren, and that's a sacred moment. And that's what Heschel said, like sacred living. It's not about acquiring information, it's encountering sacred moments. So you could learn the Daf of Gemara, and it's not a sacred moment if you're not sensing the divine presence. I could be on the floor with the magnetiles, and like those who were grandparents, no, that's the Holy of Holies. Forget about the tent of meeting. You're in the Holy of Holies when you're playing the magnetiles with your grandchildren. You're part of something so much bigger. It really is. It's amazing. In essence, the PSS, the Rebbe, is saying the spiritual practice of diminishing one's ego and then redirecting ego energy to help others can lead to our connecting with loving kindness. Oh, do we need that? So godly. This soul exchange then advances both uprooting the I-ness from the heart and sensing connection with the divine. Cultivating the midah of letting go of the me to be with the we, and investing our soul in fulfilling the human need for connection, we may nurture God consciousness in ourselves and the world around us. So therefore, the verse that says nobody can go through the tent of meeting is very relevant when we peel away the obvious and explore what I shared with you. So thank you very much.
So, Yiscah, thank you for that very wonderful teaching. I'm going to ask you to maybe grab this mic.
Oh.
Join me.
I would love to. Okay.
Great. So we want to leave adequate time for some questions and more interaction with all of you. So I think we'll spend just a little while, maybe 10 minutes, talking, the two of us, and then open it up for more of a conversation before we wrap up and have books available for signing and enjoying. So I wanted to, we thought it might be interesting, as Yiscah was saying, this is a little bit of an experiment, to start with the teaching and then do a little bit of an excavation into your thinking behind the book, right? Why did you put the book together in this particular way? How are you scaffolding your lessons in a way that they're applicable to us here in Baltimore in the 21st century, as you said so beautifully? And so this is really an unpacking of the book itself. And then if you have questions either about the specific teaching on Parashat Aharei Mot, Kedoshim, or on the kind of methodology that Yiscah is applying to the book, we want to give you a chance to ask those questions. So tell us about what inspired this project. What's the core message? What are you trying to accomplish, especially for someone who maybe is encountering your work for the first time?
Okay, 10 minutes or 10 hours?
Okay. Not 10 minutes per question, 10 minutes total.
Okay, so all discomfort is what produces innovation. I came into the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox world, in the early 1970s, and I came from an uncomfortable place because I was really searching and seeking a relationship to understand what it is to be with God. I always believed in God. I don't come from an observant home of the mitzvot, but I came from a home, may both my parents, their memories be for a blessing. They taught my sisters and I how to live with good attributes we call midot, because that's how you live a good life. And only later on did I learn that's ethics of the fathers. But what got me into the ultra-Orthodox world was I thought, well, I made the mistake that many people make, that the more one looks externally from another century, it could only be because they must be more religious and really believe in God more, or at least have a relationship with God. So I went into that world seeking answers. How do I don't want to look like you, but I want to be like you. And that was my mistake, because I equated one with the other, and it's anything but that. Doesn't mean that there are not really spiritually sensitive people in the Haredi world, but it's not because they have long payot, or the woman has a long dress and covers her hair. It's because they cultivate the sensitivity. But I didn't know that then. I was in my 20s. So I stayed in that world for 15 years, and married, and children, making aliyah. And I felt after all that time that I was just dried up. And no one was malicious. There's no malintention. I felt that they were answering someone else's questions. They weren't answering my questions. And how often, like Einstein said, if you keep making the same mistake over and over and expect a different result, you're insane. I didn't want to become insane, because I kept making the same mistake, expecting a different result. And by 1991, living in Israel for my second war, my children's first war, this is their second war, my third war, my grandchildren's first war, I said, I can't do this anymore with this world. It's like, I felt so dried up. So that took me out of the Torah world. I needed a Shabbaton, Shinat Shabbaton, we call it. Like I needed like a sabbatical from Judaism. I really did. And when I started to return, I knew I'd be returning. I said, I can't return to what I left. I need to return to where I was in my 20s, only now I know a lot more. I also don't know a lot more. The more you learn, the more you know you don't know. So I knew I really didn't know a lot more than in my 20s, but I knew enough to know I'm not going back to where I came. So that's when I became very inspired by Reb Zalman and renewal. And that's how I got to know the Piasetzner. So I started living my new Judaism. It really was new Judaism for me. And it started about 20 years ago, and it just gets better every day. I feel like a newcomer every day. So how does that get to the book? I'm on a trip in January of 2022 with Pardes. The dean, or Dean Emeritus now, David Bernstein, every year takes a group from Pardes to do a heritage tour in Poland, which includes the history long before the Holocaust, like amazing commentators in our Jewish tradition and legal codifiers like the Ramah, who are buried in Poland, and then also about the Holocaust, and then the future of where Polish Jews are going. Just so happens, by the way, the chief rabbi of Poland, turns out His father was my rabbi in Patchogue, Long Island, New York. And I remember when he was a toddler, because he's about 5 years younger than me, so when he was 7, someone who's 5 years younger is a little toddler. And I reminded him when I saw him, I remember you, Rabbi David Shederich, was the chief rabbi of Poland, and when you were running around in the backyard, and I was a big 5- and 6-year-old. Like, talk about a world that's like just so united, in spite of ourselves, we're so unified. Well, while we were on that tour, we went to the Jewish cemetery in Warsaw, which is a huge, huge cemetery. And we saw this person, we saw that person, the Netziv and the original Rav Soloveitchik. It was quite moving. I asked David, I said, David, there were 15 of us all together, another faculty member, about 12, 13 students. I said, could we go to the grave sites of the family of the Piaseczna Rebbe? We know he's not buried there. He was murdered and buried in a mass grave. But his wife, who passed away before the Holocaust of cancer, his mother and son, who died in the beginning through the air campaign. They were, as we saw in Israel, they were hit by shrapnel. They were buried there, and he buried them there. So he said, all the years I've been to the cemetery, I don't know where he's buried, I don't know where this cemetery is. Well, I had the location because of a scholar, David Reisner, in Israel, rewrote the Ish Kodesh with all the footnotes that the Piaseczna had. And in it, he has a picture of the gravestones with the location. So David said, I still don't know where it is. So 2 of my students, remember, they're like younger. Oh, we'll go on Google, we'll figure it out. I'm telling you, they had a map online of the whole cemetery, and David was like, in all the years he's done this was a first for him. We get to the plots, and there is the plot, there's this stone in memory of his wife, where he acknowledges to her, like, she was his chavruta. They learned Zohar every day. She edited all his manuscripts.
Wow.
And for a Hasidic Jew in the early 20th century, that was quite bold of him, and that he publicized it. While I'm reading the Hebrew to all my many of the students that were there were in my Piaseczna Rebbe's class. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, so to speak. All of a sudden, no exaggeration, I got the call. I really did. It's as if she said to me, Chaya, her name was Rebbetzin Chaya, now it's your turn. You need to write. You need to write my husband's Torot. And it started out, it was going to be just about the Piaseczna, but it brings something much more, because that's how babies evolve when they're conceived. They're born in a very different way than when they were first conceived. So the idea that was conceived at this site of where the Rebbe's wife is buried, and it was typical Polish winter. It was cold, it was windy, it was nasty, and we were all perspiring with spiritual inspiration. I mean, and so I left Jerusalem, not knowing I was going to write a book. I came back home to Yerushalayim. I'm writing a book.
I'm writing this book.
This book.
Yeah.
This
Great.
book. This is the
Clearly.
book. This is the book.
That actually might have been a 10-minute response, but it was really good.
I made it short. I really made it as short as I could.
You spoke about Heschel earlier, who's also one of my rabbinic heroes, and one of the things that Heschel talks about is moving beyond just text study to text people. And over the years, you've really struck me as a text person, somebody who embodies your Torah and who allows your Torah to, help form you as a person. I'd love for you to talk about your concept of midot. When I think midot, I go right to the Musar movement, and I'm thinking the midah of chesed or the midah of anava, and you use midot a little differently. I've never heard of a midah of moving from the me to the we. So maybe talk to us a little bit about your understanding of midot, how you present them in the book, and how it might also connect to your exercises that you have at the end of the chapters, which we didn't do here, but you can see it in the handout.
So, and I do explain this in the introduction, that I was never a student of Musar, not because I chose not to be, but I chose to be something else. I do have friends, though, that I've made acquaintanceship with over the decades who are students of Musar. And much of how they explained it to me really resonated with me, to be a kinder person, to really become a more godly human being, which is really a contradiction, to be a godly human being, but that's the divine contradiction. The problem I had with Musar, this is my issue, it's not everybody's issue, but I wanted to add to that because it focused for me, and I want to be real careful, this is my experience. It focuses too much on the ego, on me becoming a better person. But that's not what God's asking of me. God's not asking me, I don't believe God wants me to be a better person. I believe God wants me to be a godly person. So the Musar can help, but it's not an end destination. It's actually part of the road, part of the Masa, part of the journey. The end destination is not for me to be a more refined individual, a better individual, because then I'm still focusing on me as an individual. I want to be able to be part of something that's so much bigger than me that I need to be godly to be part of that. So that's why I see the midot as seeds, where I'm planting a seed, but it really isn't planting a seed because they're all already in me. It's like already God started with the starter pack of the seeds, and I'm to add to that because we have the potential. You know, when someone says to me, "But I'm not spiritual like you," I said, "Yes, you are. I mean, everyone's spiritual. You may not be as spiritually sensitive, but I've spent 15 years in daily practices. It's like going to the gym to work out. Oh, you have a tricep muscle? Well, you also have a tricep muscle. You just don't know you have it because you haven't exercised it. So everyone here in this room is spiritual. It's a choice. Do you want to be more godly or not? And that's free will. If you do, we need to cultivate like a garden. So that's how I see the midot. I see the midot as measured from midah, which is a measurement. And when you try on clothes, you're asked what's your midah. When I started learning Hebrew, like many years ago, and I was asking clothes, what's your midah? Oh, chesed. It also means in modern Hebrew, what's your size? Because it's a measurement. It's lindot, it's the measure. So these are measured pieces, what I call of spiritual sensitivity. And that's how I use the word. Now, one of my students who enrolls in my classes through Applied Jewish Spirituality is a real committed teacher of Musar. And he said to me, we had a conversation on Zoom, he said, I have never seen Musar taught as a spiritual practice. I said, that's what, I wrote this for you, that someone who is so committed realizes, oh, there's a whole spiritual component to this. It's not just about being a better, kinder person. Yeah.
No, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I was thinking, as I was listening to you teach the Piasetzner, that I wondered if the Piasetzner had ever read Buber.
Well,
and I don't know the answer. Maybe you know the answer to that, but it feels like he must have. I mean, Buber, of course, read Chassidut and other things, so he's coming to his understanding of I, thou, not from nowhere. But it coded to me very Buberian in a way.
You know, it's like the Chumash. We only know what's written. We don't know what's not written.
Right.
Because it's not written. And when people start making deductions because it's not written, I think that's really dangerous because it really limits God and you're creating God in your image rather than realizing you're created in God's image. It's the same thing with this. We don't know. We don't know if the PSS did or did not, chose to or not chose to learn Buber. We do know that Hillel Zeitlin, who lived in Warsaw, initially it was the Jewish area, the Jewish neighborhood, which became the ghetto. We know that Hillel Zeitlin and Heschel also there. I mean, he went to Germany, then after Kristallnacht he came back, and then he left as quick as he could. But those three giants were in Warsaw at the same time. I would really find it hard to believe that he didn't learn a little bit of Buber. We don't know if he learned, though, from Hillel Zeitlin. And when I get up there, one of my questions are going to be to the PSS and Hillel, did you two learn with each other? Because we know Hillel Zeitlin was very influenced by Buber. That's a fact, because he quotes him.
Yeah.
The PSS doesn't quote him, but that doesn't mean he didn't.
Right. Yeah. I want to move to a little bit of the kind of practical application of this stuff. Maybe ask just two more questions and then open it up.
Sure.
One is, we're living through really challenging times. You alluded to this in your teaching. It's a really hard time. And I'm curious how you find that your spiritual work is bringing comfort amidst trauma, either as an Israeli citizen, sort of living and teaching in Yerushalayim, or just thinking about all that we've been through in the world, right? COVID having messed us up in ways that we can't even begin to really understand yet, I think, and October 7th and what that's meant for the Jewish people and beyond. You're here, you know, in a moment of sort of a ceasefire, but obviously there's the ongoing war, right, and will you be here? So when you think about these beautiful gems of teaching that you have, how does this feel, how would you propose to us that it could be relevant as we navigate these really kind of tricky waters?
That question has been posed to me so many times in the past year since the book was released, and even before. Like when I was here in Baltimore 2 years ago, it came up. It's always coming up because we all want a better world. You know, some people call it Mashiach, some people call it redemption, some people call it a better world. Whatever it is, nobody I've met yet believes this is the end all, the way we're living now. I mean, we have, as we say in Hebrew, yesh ma la'asot. We have what to do, right? So I'll give a part A and a part B. I'll be as short as I can, but I have to answer that in two different ways. The first is through the lens of the Yiscah Smith, who wrote in B'nai Machshava Tovah, which is translated as the Conscious Community by Andrew Cohen Kiner, who is a disciple of Reb Zalman, who was requested by Reb Zalman to translate this one book of the Yiscah Smith. So you see how definitely neo-Hasidic, even if the PSS didn't say, I follow Hillel Zeitlin, we know that Reb Zalman did, and he wanted the name Machshava translated. He writes in that book, which is different modalities of cultivating mindfulness and awareness of the divine. He has this beautiful chapter on feelings, on Hagashot, and he does not believe there's a positive feeling or a negative feeling. All feelings, because we don't control our feelings, we only control what we think. But if I feel cold, you can say, oh, how can you be cold? It's warm. I feel cold. I don't know, I feel cold. I like vanilla ice cream. You like chocolate ice cream. I didn't decide I like vanilla. So I didn't decide to feel pain. I didn't decide to feel happy. These come out of my own will. They are messages from the Almighty, from God. He believes all the feelings that we call the happy feelings, the good feelings, the celebration feelings, that's one way God is making me aware that I need to express more gratitude. Because every time I feel happy, Baruch Hashem. You know, we say in Israel, like, Baruch Hashem, it's miserable outside. Yeah, I'm alive though, Baruch Hashem, to know that it's miserable outside. So those are the feelings of pleasure. But what about the feelings of pain? I'm not going to so quickly say, oh, Baruch Hashem, I'm miserable. Baruch Hashem, I have the flu or the COVID, or Baruch Hashem this, or Baruch Hashem. So he said, it's still messages from the Almighty, but for a different reason. It's to help you become closer through prayer. Oh, please, God, help me, help me, help me. Whatever it is, financial concerns, relationship concerns, all different concerns. I don't like feeling pain. I don't like feeling uncomfortable. Nobody that I know really does. But we're not supposed to. We're supposed to see it as a message from our Creator, that there's different ways to become closer to the Creator. One is through gratitude, one is through prayer. Those are the two main ways that feelings come into play here. So that's the philosophy, that's the theory. Now, experientially, as I share that, people have asked me, do you really believe when you practice this, that it's changing the world? That is really bringing, like, redemption to the world? I said, no, I don't believe that. I wanted to believe that years ago, but as you get older, you may not get smarter, but hopefully you become a little wiser. And I will tell you, when I do what I believe I'm supposed to be doing from God's will, I'm not really sure the world is better for it. I am sure, though, I'm better for it. And when I'm better for it, I give the world a better version of Yiscah. And that is so palpable, it is so real, it brings so much encouragement. If you feel so aloof and so lonely, I can help you feel less lonely. I have some of the tools that I have learned from my teachers, with my mistakes, with my ups and my downs. So that's how I respond. The least I can do is become a more godly person. So I'm not part of the problem. I don't know how much I am part of the solution, but I'm sure not adding to the problem.
That's beautiful. I want to open it up to questions now, but I actually might do kind of a yes and on that, which is, I think one of the things you offered today was to kind of move beyond the traditional approach of Musar, of just working on the self, and actually in some ways, like the working with the self actually is working with the divine, is working with the world, right? I mean, that's
yes,
kind of the...
If it's part of your service. If
Yeah.
we're called Mamlechet Kohanim. Mamlechet Kohanim, in modern Hebrew, lekahen means to be in service.
Mm-hmm.
So the Kohanim, to the rest of Israel, were in service to us. We are a kingdom of priests to humanity. We are supposed to model to humanity what it means to be in service to a greater good. So that's why I want to be the higher Yiscah, not so I can pat myself on the back. Wow, you really were good today. No, it's like, wow, you really were good today. Now go out into the world and show it. So you can bring more healing.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, it's very hard for a rabbi to give up his microphone, but I'm going to do it. So when we have two, and I'm going to hand this off to Sharon, and let's just open it up for questions for Yiscah.
Thank you so much, John Meyer. So I'm thinking pride is a real aspect of the focus on me, not me personally. I have been prideful in the past. Anyway, so did you ever think about incorporating pride into your research and what have you in this regard?
Well, the word ga'avah, which means to be proud. To be proud, to have pride, is both positive and not positive. It depends how it's used.
You know, I'm thinking of the negative. In other words, I'm better than
well,
you.
if that's how one understands pride, you're right.
Yeah.
It's not even a matter of being right. This doesn't have a right or a wrong. It's neutral, and how we use it either putrefies it or enhances it. So when I look at my sons and I look at my grandchildren in the Army and say, I am so proud of you. The pride I have from a dream when I first came to Israel at 20 years old in 1971, and I have grandchildren now that are so committed, they're so responsible and so dedicated to making sure their grandparents are safe. That's their reason, part of their reason for being in the Army, because we're the mini of the macro of the whole nation. I'm very, very proud. Sure. I'm also proud that I wrote this book. This took years. This is a miracle. However, if that's all I focus on, it becomes putrefied. It becomes putrefied. I'd rather be proud that I'm Jewish and I've been given a mandate to be in service to something much bigger than me. It's the same word in Hebrew, it's the same word in English. Ani gava b'cha, I'm proud of you. It could be for a number of reasons. It's how we use it. If we use it as a resource. So definitely the writers of Musar, and the Ashkenaz say gaiva. That's it's so bad. Well, it is bad when it's used to inflate the ego.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick little, to complete, I'm Jewish, I can't answer in 2 seconds. That's just not in me. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once asked, what's the difference between two people that have the same credentials, same age, as similar as two people could be? They are. One person is outright arrogant and filled with this pride. The other is humbled by, is a humble person. So he said, this is such an insight, the person who's so proud of himself, and it ends there, keeps looking what he did in the past. Look, I wrote this book. I made Aliyah. I. The person who has the same achievements, same awards, same recognition. So, wow, if this is what I did yesterday, imagine what I could do tomorrow to be in service. So I try to look at anything that I feel proud of. Like if this is what I did now, get ready for the next time I'm here. I don't know when that will be, but hopefully it'll be more and better in terms of expansion.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Impossible.
Bye.
Hi, thank you, Elon. Also a student of Ribzal and all the other teachers you mentioned. I was thinking as you were teaching about when the cardinals are picking a new pope, thousands and thousands of people show up in the square outside to wait for the announcement.
For that smoke.
Right? And I was thinking, on the one hand, I'm glad that we didn't have a mosh pit outside of the Kohen Gadol going in to connect with God in Yom Kippur. On the other hand, I was thinking also about, like, there are times when, as leaders, and as servants of the Holy One, we need to see the people whose offerings we are trying to elevate. And then there are times when seeing the people gets in the way. And I'm curious, like, why do you think, like, even Moshe had Joshua with him most of the time. Like, why do you think that Dafka on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol has to go in alone?
Well, just as I said earlier to the rabbi, this question many people have asked me a lot. No one's ever asked me that question. So you're getting it fresh. As we say in Pardes, fresh from the orchard. That's the name of their weekly newsletter, because Pardes means orchard, but it also means Shadran's Josh and Soda. So this is fresh from the orchard. So I'm spending very little time meditating, contemplating, researching. I'm just going to give you my response could be, it's the one day of the year, it's the one day in the year that we're really being asked, even with the times when there was a Kohen Gadol, during the Mishkan, during the Beit HaMikdash, it's a really very private day. Only God knows what I'm asking to be forgiven for and what I'm not asking to be forgiven for, because either I'm too embarrassed, which is ego, or I don't even know. And we even have in the confessions that we say, please forgive me for those sins I don't even know. It's so personal, even though we say Avinu Malkeinu, and we do in the plural, Hashamu, Baganu, all that's in the plural because we're doing it in community. It's probably one of the most vulnerable, naked, raw moments of the year. And the way I believe I could really do this is the Kohen Gadol represents total being in service to something so much bigger because of his responsibility. Whatever he had to do, I can do alone. I don't have to be a Kohen Gadol. But to know that the Kohen Gadol was in service to me, to give me energetically the belief that I can do this. I can, as much as it may hurt or embarrass, it's just between me and God. I only advertise publicly what we all advertise publicly, but privately, nobody knows except God what I'm saying. And that I derive from the Kohen Gadol. To be, as we say, I don't put a period at the end, I put a comma.
I'm just thinking about how in this setup the priest nullifies himself, and yet the Vayikra, the priestly system is very hierarchical. It's about status. So it's very surprising. So I'm curious if you have any more to say about how Chassidut thinks about the priest. Like how does the priest get superimposed onto the individual? Because when I read Leviticus, the priest is the one who's he's the big man in charge. It's all about, maybe not ego, but it's about status, certainly.
Well, there is a status. I mean, it started with Aharon and then his sons. So that's where the idea of having a main, or the head Kohen, having the regular Kohanim, or the everyday Kohanim, well, first of all, Judaism as a whole, and even in Chassidut, it's not opposed to hierarchy. It's like, again, with pride. It depends how it's used. See, when we use something to distance, and to manipulate, and to conquer, and to subjugate, well then we tend to fall into this, if I could use a modern word, binary, right? So either it's going to be used for that, or it may not be good at all. But It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that. I will say that Chassidut, as you learned, as we shared from the Meshiloach, turns everything upside down and inside out, really believes, and it's another part of my book, all of us are Kohanim. All of us are Kohen Gadol. In our own private, personal relationship with God, I am nothing less than a Kohen Gadol, because I was created to be in service to this relationship. And I don't depend on anyone. I can't. This is a direct connection. I can be, like the Piasesta does write in many of his books, to learn from others, to be inspired by others. Even Rav Kook teaches. At the end of his life, he passed in 1935. In 1933, he wrote in Pinkas Yerushalayim. It was never even published. It was found handwritten in his study, that each one of us has a maslul miyuchad. We each have a particular specific path, and he said we need to see it as precious. But it doesn't mean I can't learn. I mean, it says in Pirkei Avot, as a chacham, a person who learns from everybody. Sometimes you learn what not to do. That's as important as to learn what to do. So we're all Kohanim, but in a relationship privately with God, going back to the Holy of Holies, all of us are a Kohen Gadol. Yeah.
That's okay.
Maybe we'll.
Thank you. Great. So I'll just maybe close by saying, I was thinking you spoke about Chassidut as maybe art to halacha's science, which is not the way that I thought about either before. It was really a lovely idea. Bonnie Goralnik and I were learning today of our Mishnah class. So we study Mishnah every week. And we were looking at, in this case, the beginning of chapter 11 of Mishnah Shabbat. And there's this interesting discussion about what happens. We know you're not supposed to carry, right? You're not supposed to transfer something from the private domain to the public domain, or vice versa on Shabbat. But what about throwing and not just walking something or handing something over? And there's a debate about if you were to take, let's say, a football and you stand in my yard, and I live across the street from you, and I throw the football to you and you catch the football on the other side, have I actually transferred the football through the public domain of the street? In other words, is the airspace actually in the public domain, or does it have to actually land in the public domain, caught in the public domain? And Rabbi Akiva says that actually you're chayav, that when you pass through the airspace, it's as if the football has now been moved from the private to the public to the private, which is forbidden on Shabbat. But the Chachamim say you're patur, you're actually exempt, because really what you're doing is you're bypassing the public space and moving it from the private to another private domain. And as I was thinking about the high priest and his moving through the Ohel Moed, right, into the courtyard, into the Dvir, right, into the Holy of Holies, the crux of that question is really, is he the same entity as he moves through one space into the next space? And for me, it got me really deeply thinking about what does it mean both to be embodied people of the world, right? We're not ascetics as a people. Right? That's not core to Jewish ideology. There are ascetic tendencies maybe, but it's really frowned upon, where we're meant to live in our bodies. The mitzvot are embodied practices. Cleaving to the divine and sort of departing from the physical self in some capacity isn't in any way negating the self in the way that maybe a Buddhist might want to negate themselves. And so I'll just leave today thinking very deeply about what does it mean to contemplate dveikut, really connecting with God, with the other, with community in a very deep way. And I want to thank you for inviting us into a space that both tugged at our noodles a little bit, got us thinking differently about a verse that maybe we had overlooked in this week's parashah, and also got us thinking deeply about how our process of kind of inhabiting the airspace of godliness might actually lead us to kind of a better existence. So thank you so much for a really delightful evening. So Yiscah